Apathy versus empathy, or empathy versus apathy. These are the two contenders in the ring. And who wins will define your life and the life of everyone around you. So let's define these two terms. Empathy means where you feel, you care for another. You see someone in pain or someone in joy, and you partner with them. It becomes part of your joy. Apathy is the exact opposite. A certain detachment doesn't make a difference to me. Can't resist the line. The guy asked his friend, what's worse, ignorance or apathy? He says, I don't know and I don't care. But it's not just cliche. It's not just semantics. It actually defines who you are and what the world will look like, especially your world. I remember the first time reading about mirror neurons, that there's something about us, humans, that we mirror our neurons. And the classic example is if you see somebody about to slam a door on their finger, you may do ouch, even though it's not your finger, but you identify with them. It's as if you're experiencing, your neurons are mirroring their neurons. And especially when you're familiar with quantum mechanics, that there's an integral unity that connects every atom, and therefore every human being as well, it makes total sense. That on the surface level, we seem to be separate entities, but in truth, we're really all one. We're part of one organism. And anything happening to one part of the organism affects everything else in the organism. Like that classic joke. Several people went on a boat ride. Each one bought their spot. And middle of the ocean, someone decides to begin drilling under their seat. And water starts coming in. And people saying to him, what are you doing? He says, it's my seat, I bought it. But the fact is, if water comes under your seat, it's going to come under everyone's seat. And it could put everyone in danger. So there's a certain collective connection that we all have. But then on the other side, we can easily be blinded and ignore that connection. And hence again, the empathy versus the apathy. The empathy sensing our connection, and therefore what happens to you in some way affects me and vice versa. Apathy, no. Each one of us separate. Live and let live. Survival of the fittest, which of course can take on far more destructive manifestations and implications. So this is a battle between two approaches. I remember recently seeing a cartoon. Two people sitting at a bar, and one of them says to the other, do you remember exactly when you began to not care? And it brought to mind how many people in the world have come to that point. Whatever the reason, we get jaded, we've been hurt, we get older, more cynical, more self-absorbed, however you explain it. There is an element that can't take over where we care less. I don't know if it's an age thing, but definitely a certain point when we're younger and more idealistic, there's a certain passion that sometimes gets blunted as time passes. I have to say that sometimes it's the other way around. People get older, they become more sensitive. But regardless, there are definitely two options in our lives. And what you'll choose will make all the difference. Yes, Robert Frost did right. Two roads diverged in the wood. One was the one more traveled on, and one was a road less traveled on. And I took the less traveled, the road less traveled, and that has made all the difference. But what are these two roads? It's not just whether you're going to be original and creative or just be a conformist. These two roads can also be the road of apathy and the road of empathy. In this week's Bible portion, it's a very powerful verse. Moses, yes, that mysterious man Moses, comes into Egypt and he sees an Egyptian beating a Jewish slave. So in addition to being enslaved by the Egyptians and that inhumanity, he's being beat. And it says, the verse says, continues and says, and Moshe looked around here and there. He saw he didn't see any person. That's the expression. He saw no one. So he took the Egyptian and he killed him and buried him in the sand. What was Moses looking at? What was he looking for? He was looking if anyone cared. Does anyone cry out when there's such an injustice? Now you would think no one would be silenced when you see injustice, but unfortunately history tells us otherwise. Look at the Holocaust. I'm sure there were some protests here and there, but not enough to stop it. And then you have all these videos, you see people mugging someone, attacking someone, an accident, people riding over someone, and everyone passes by as if nothing's happening. I don't want to get involved. And then, of course, the beautiful, noble stories of people who did get involved and did stand up and at least protested and did something, but definitely not apathy. If you think about it in your life, just look at today, tomorrow. How do you react when you see a situation? Someone's bullying someone. Someone else is hurting another. So of course there are those that just join in for the fun, which of course is part of the tragedy. There are those that just look another way. I don't want to get involved. And there are those that will do something about it. Ask yourself and just gauge yourself. This is not about judgment, not about criticizing anyone, but it's good to be aware. Would you call yourself the empathetic one, or would you call yourself the apathetic one? And I'm sure it's not black or white. There are times that we have more empathy, at times that we don't. But being aware of how you approach it is already the beginning of a healthy attitude. Awareness is half the cure of a problem. It's when we're oblivious and we just follow our reflexes or our instincts. That's where the problems begin. So, when you think about it, it does, even though we don't like to put things into generalities, but sometimes that approach to life, were you apathetic or were you empathetic, is going to define your humanity. And in many ways, the humanity of the entire world, because we all affect each other. And there's so many places this plays itself out. Because you have to remember, when it comes to confrontation, when it comes to anything that is uncomfortable, people shy away. They retreat in most cases. You know, why should I get involved? And I'm not saying in every case you have to get involved. There are certain situations, there's certain boundaries, a respect. But the approach of just being, it's not my problem, someone else's, actually goes against the grain, not just of our coexistence, but even of your own conscience, your own being. Because we are part of one larger reality. And this plays itself out, as I said, in so many different ways. Some biologists will say, hey, even empathy is also part of our selfish existence, part of the selfish gene, especially evolutionary biology. Because it's all about taking care of yourself. Part of taking care of yourself, you know, is when there's empathy from you to others, you'll get something in return. Yeah, I don't know if you want to call it a cynical attitude, but it definitely is a selfish take on something that was meant to be selfless. Because we all know there's something inside of us that resonates, that even brings you to deep tears in a good way. When you see someone really caring for another. I recently went to visit someone whose child unfortunately developed a disease that caused them to turn blind. Beautiful little child. And you have to see how the mother sat with this child. Not pity, not just out of duty and obligation. This profound love, transcending the challenge, but just showing this profound love, this care. And when you think about that, no. Is that part of the selfish gene? That the mother gets something for it because it's her flesh and blood? You want to dismiss it that way? So be it. I'm not getting into a scientific argument about it. It just was much deeper than that. Or you hear about the husband whose wife is suffering from Alzheimer's, and she's slowly forgetting, and she's forgotten her children's names. And the only thing she remembers, of course, is her husband who visits her every day, till the point where she needed care, 24/7 care. And she's starting to forget her husband as well. And the nurse tells her husband one day, I know you come visit your wife every day, but she doesn't recognize you anymore. Basically saying there's no point. And he responds, yes, but I recognize her. These are the moments that we shouldn't need, God forbid, disease or illness or setbacks. But sometimes they reveal, the eclipse of the sun reveals the deepest part of the sun. That's where you see something that really is what defines us as human beings. The ability to transcend ourselves and care for another. In Jewish literature, and it's a universal concept, including in the Kabbalistic and mystical literature, it talks about 4 categories of life, sometimes called the 4 kingdoms. One is the mineral world, everything that's inanimate. The next is the world of vegetation, things that grow. So they don't move about, but they grow. Flowers, plants, fruit, grain, anything that grows. The third is the kingdom of the first 2 are sometimes referred to as fauna and flora and fauna and flora. Third is the kingdom of animal kingdom. The animals, all the animals and creatures of the world, so they don't just grow in one place. They move about and have a whole life force about them. And then there's the 4th category, we'll call the human, the Homo sapiens, the human. But it's interesting, the way the sages describe the human, they don't say human. They say medaber, the speaker, the one who speaks. Because what makes our species unique is that we communicate. Now we know there's communication between other species as well. They say even flowers communicate through pollination and other ways. But definitely animals communicate, but not quite develop speech. And everyone agrees speech transformed relationships because you can really communicate with each other. And we're not just talking about survival communication. Breeding, survival, whales and other sea animals have elaborate and complex ways of communicating, including, of course, land animals. But not a language where they sit and have a conversation, where they can study together and learn together and grow together and even argue. Again, there is a primitive amount of language, but it's mostly about the survival of those species. So the question is, what's speech? Speech allows you to transcend yourself because you can listen and speak to another. So suddenly you're getting a perspective that you wouldn't have had on your own. If you don't really have that ability, you're ultimately, all of existence orbits around yourself, and then there's enough speech to be able to interact and negotiate to enhance your life. But not the ability to have a conversation with someone you love, to have any of a disagreement, and come away with a more crystallized idea. That's why it's called, because it's not just about a human being having intelligence. It's a human being that can transcend yourself and interact with another. Several times, and I've done this a number of times, I've given classes and workshops on love. So love, many people see as a need among other needs. You need to eat, you need to drink, you need to sleep. You need to survive, you need companionship. And love is companionship, intimacy, and many other things. But very few understand that love is more about giving than about receiving. It's about getting out of your own space and experiencing another person. In other words, the other person is allowing you to transcend yourself. Love is more transcendence than just filling another need. And speech, at its best, is transcendence. Because you can speak and listen to someone else speak and learn something new. To go out of your own subjective, myopic vision and see a bigger picture. So speech, therefore, symbolizes that idea of transcendence, of growth. Yes, the idea of becoming, instead of a self-contained, apathetic entity, an empathetic creature. Now there's speech, actual speech, but there's also sensing and feeling another person. So I submit to you that one of the greatest things that we human beings can do, and that's where empathy is so critical and apathy is so harmful, is it allows us to become the best we can be because we're getting out of our own parameters, our own limited perspectives, and allowing in broader horizons. It's a form of suspending and going beyond your comfort zone and your security blankets to learn something new, to experience something new. So in addition to the beauty of empathy, that you care for another, and as a result you act on it and you do something to help another, which is beautiful, it also makes you grow into becoming a greater person. It exercising your so-called emotional muscles to be more than just someone who cares about your own subjective needs. And apathy, of course, is the diametric opposite. It's cutting yourself off, it's closing up, and not having that breath, the breathing, which is the cross-pollination and interaction between individuals. It becomes self-contained, and we all know anything that's self-contained ultimately dies. We all need to breathe. We all need to open up our channels. You put anything into an enclosure, especially an airtight one, it can't last. So empathy opens us up to the bigger picture from our own experiences and the bigger picture of the world around us. So in many ways you can say the progress of the human race can be defined by that, exactly that point. How great is our empathy? Empathy not just for those that are like us, but also for those that are different. Different cultures, different ethnicities, color, creed, and even people you disagree with. The idea that all of us are created in the divine image, and as such have inalienable rights, is part of what empathy is about. The opposite is you have empathy only for those that are like you. And you could have worse than apathy, it could be even hatred. Or maybe apathy may be worse even. Empathetic to everyone else. So as you can imagine by now, this is a case for empathy. And how vital it is for our own growth, for our own success, and of course the success of everyone around us. And that's why, in a sense, it personifies kindness and love, which is the essence of what defines us as humans. And the world indeed has become a more loving place. Despite our challenges and despite the wars and the injustices and the hatred and the discrimination that exists, but overall the trajectory, things have gotten better. And generally speaking, When you move from materialism to spirituality, materialism is more of a divisive force. Spirituality is a uniting one. So that too helps define that trajectory. But above all, it comes down to you as an individual. You have these choices all the time. Now, of course, you need to have wisdom and discretion to know, people need time for themselves. You cannot just be 24/7 there for others, meaning only caring for others and not taking care of your own needs and other people's close to you's needs. So there's a need for a balance. In the words of Hillel, if I'm only for myself, if I'm not for myself, who will be for me? But if I'm only for myself, what am I? And then he concludes, and if not now, when? So it's about a balance between, yes, yourself, taking care of yourself, but then not forgetting you cannot be complete without the other. Like a symphony, with many different instruments and many different musicians, each one complementing the other. But each one has to do their song, has to play their part. So all this leads to what we call the harmony within diversity that is so critical in any success, in any entity, any institution, organization, any family unit, any community. So this is a good time to take on that resolution by becoming aware of your choices, by becoming aware of what drives you, and how do you address when you see something that's troubling, or in general anything. Do you retreat? Do you move away? Or do you engage? So I want to conclude by blessing each one of us. We all have empathy in our hearts and souls, but sometimes it gets blocked up. You get distracted. So it gets obfuscated, and we're busy with our whatever we feel is our immediate needs. It's good and important to sometimes step back and unclutter your life and see and allow your empathy to shine, your care, your compassion. And when you see yourself being indifferent or complacent or apathetic, to check that. Now, where's that coming from? Because it's always connected to something that's more selfish. Therefore makes you more cold, more detached, which is the opposite of what all existence is. You look at a tree, you look at nature in general. It's all about the interaction of things. No part says, you know what, I'm going on vacation, I don't care about any the rest of you. Everything is doing its job because everyone is needed in the scheme of things. So may we all be blessed to recognize that. And you begin simply by awareness, as I said. Write it down. Write down throughout the day. Just give yourself a little test. How many situations were you empathetic and how many were you apathetic? That alone, I assure you, will cause you to change things, because most mistakes we make are due to the fact that we're not looking, we're ignorant, we're minimizing, and then you suddenly see and say, oh, 1 second, I didn't realize. This is true in every area, dieting, any other behavior, changes of behavior patterns. As soon as you're aware, you say, I didn't know I was spent 7 hours playing a video game or watching football. And I'm not here to criticize, I'm just speaking about awareness of how you're using your time, where your energy is going. And that awareness then brings to action. And yes, indeed, that great line that I always quote, not sure who coined it, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. It's about the care. From the youngest age, we thrive on care because it demonstrates the love, the nurturing, the attention, the validation. I care for you, meaning I value you. Something so vital, more than oxygen, to the human spirit, the human psyche. And may we take this message, share it with others, and have the appropriate ripple effect, butterfly effect. Again, One thing connects and affects everything else around it. Never ever forget that. Thank you so much. Simon Jacobson here at meaningfullife.com, where we have this and many of our offerings. Please subscribe to them. Subscribe to our growing YouTube channel. And please share. Share is the word. It's a form of empathy. Love to hear your thoughts, your feedback, your comments. Be blessed and be well. Thank you.
This program is brought to you by the Meaningful Life Center. Please help us continue our programs. Make even a small contribution at meaningfullife.com/donate.